Hey Barb, hey listeners, we're back with the Marketing Share podcast, and my background looks different. I'm in a new location. That's the first thing I'm
Cool.
leading with. So, yeah, this is the first time I'm doing a show remote. I'm traveling, visiting some family, so it's great to do that. Hopefully, uh, everyone gets a chance to do that every now. But, um, and yet the podcast still goes. You found us a really cool guest. Tell us about this guy, John, Barb.
Yeah. Sometimes, right, you enter in the conversation, right? Whether it's on LinkedIn or wherever it is. And that's how I kind of found John as I resonated with something he said. And it really made sense to me in some of the work that I've done with clients and so forth. So today we have John Short. He's the CEO of Compound Growth Marketing, and he helps B2B companies with their go-to-market motions, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's really cool about John, and he works with a lot of CMOs as well. What's really cool about him is he's really honed in on the area of demand generation for reoccurring revenue companies, right? So if you're looking for a demand gen engine that is really humming, John's probably covered it. So why don't we get started and listen to him? He's got a lot of great insights for us, whether you're brand, whether you're demand, whether you're both, and sales enablement. He's our guy.
Yeah, he is. And then let me add this part. That's his areas of expertise. But I think he's got a really interesting hook, which is what caught you, is that he has observed the importance of having that connection to your CEO. And I know this is an issue that I think it's a struggle. It's hard for a lot of marketers. Um, Either you forget how important it is, or you know how important it is, but it's still hard to find that linkage. And I like how he laid out this framework of how to think about it, because there is a bit of like you got to understand the type of CEO you have and whether that matches to the kind of marketing you're prepared to do. So that's, we're going to lead off with that, but then
Yeah.
get into the demand gen stuff too.
Yeah. I told the story before. My favorite CEO is the one who said he laid out what success needs to look like, right? I need you to launch this product, successfully. I need you to upgrade our team so that we can do XYZ. The more you lay out what your success picture looks like, the better you can match the skill set that you're looking for in a great CEO. And then you have a symbiotical relationship, right?
Right.
Between your
Right.
CEO and your CMO.
Yeah, for sure.
All
Okay,
right,
let's go talk to John.
cool.
John, welcome to our podcast. Great to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Alec and Barb, thanks for having me on the podcast today.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're excited to talk about you too, because I know as we talked to you just a little bit beforehand in our prep for this, Barb came across you just through your LinkedIn feed, and so here's evidence that, hey, posting on LinkedIn, it does work.
Yeah.
When I resonate with somebody's great thoughts, I'm like, gosh, that's a great conversation. I would love to have this. And that's what I saw when when you were discussing a little bit about what CEOs expect from CMOs. And I think that can be a huge chasm, but we'll get into that in a minute. John, thanks for coming. Tell us a little bit about your career journey and how you started Compound Growth Marketing.
Yeah. So it's an interesting journey. It started in 2008. So I graduated from college. Lehman Brothers fell. I tell people I'm always waiting to turn on the news and see like CNBC or any business channel and see people getting escorted out of their offices with cardboard boxes. Right. That was my entry point into the career, was this kind of crazy economy with hiring freezes, with dramatic shifts in how companies were investing marketing dollars. There was a technology shift. There was a shift in the economy, moving more finance jobs offshore that weren't going to come back. And so that kind of set the premise for what would happen throughout the rest of my career, where I'd always want to be really close to being associated with revenue that a company was driving into their business. And I never wanted to take a job that I had for granted, because I saw how a down economy could have a negative impact. So spent the first couple of years of my career in SEO in a small agency, just 3 people, just outside of Boston. Then went to monster.com, continued, helped them build out their SEO team. And then from there, jumped into the paid media side, working at a company called Log Me In, which was one of the first SaaS companies ever. And they were a pioneer in the freemium model for distribution of the product, and learned a ton there. And that's really where I fell in love with recurring revenue businesses, because I had an opportunity. A new CMO came on board. They were trying to build the case for budget, and had the opportunity as a business analyst to show how long it took once a lead came in the door for us to pay back the cost to acquire that customer. And I was able to see through the model that I built what would happen if we turned off marketing. And the truth was, the business would continue to grow for a couple of years because of the compounding impacts of recurring revenue businesses when you have low churn. So that's really where I fell in love with recurring revenue. And I've kind of stayed in that software space since then, going to Yesware, Workable, and then eventually starting Compound Growth Marketing. And so I've had an opportunity to see under the hood of a lot of companies, how they operate. And that is really what drove me into consulting, where probably 7 years ago, looking at the industry and looking where it was at that point versus 2008, when I had graduated, we saw about 20 to 30x growth in the amount of venture dollars going into the industry. And the hypothesis that compound growth marketing was started on was, we've seen this massive growth in software company, but the supply of talent with experience, understanding how to sell enterprise products, the knowledge of how to run performance marketing campaigns in a B2B environment, which is very different than the consumer environment, and the experience using tools like marketing automation tools and the plethora of tools that we see today just wasn't there. So starting a consultancy to kind of fill that gap felt like a really interesting move at that point. So that's how I got to where I am today.
Hmm. That's a great background. I love the experience that you have. I got to ask, the thing that hooked us about your post, right, was you calling out this distinction about being able to understand the type of CEO that you have, right? If you're a CMO and a CEO, what prompted you to share that particular insight? I'm assuming it draws from maybe your own personal experience, but also perhaps what you see going on through your agency. So just tell us a little bit about that, maybe.
Yeah, Alec, that is a great question. Where it comes from, that is deep. You're forcing me to look into the mirror and kind of understand what is the reason why a LinkedIn post comes to be. But I think it is true. I think throughout my career, I was a little bit hit or miss with the CEOs that I worked with, in terms of how compatible I was working with them. And then, in talking with friends and talking with other people in the industry, I have seen that can have a big impact on how successful you can be in your role. Um, you know, Understanding the mutual context that you have, understanding what success looks like in that role, understanding what types of strategies they're going to be more keen to try to execute against, can have a gigantic impact on how successful you are in the role. And it was Log Me In. I got to work with Mike Simon. In my mind, is a legend. He built a couple of billion-dollar companies in his career. I think he's working on another one right now. And he just had such an understanding of what was going on in his business and how he wanted to build it. And then, in my last role working with Workable, again, I had this opportunity to work with a CEO who I loved, who I got to learn a ton from. And he and I were, not always on the same page, but at least had a common understanding of what success looks like. And for the most part, we're on the same page. But like, we still had a really strong kind of relationship that allowed us to be successful. And that was, the company that I spent the longest tenure at in my career, besides compound growth marketing. So um, that relationship, I think, is critical for marketers when they're looking to find a job, because there can be a ton of turnover in this industry.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy. Um, I love the fact that you talked about a motivation, right? So many people you were motivated by some challenges in the economy, right? Earlier on in
Yeah,
your career. I actually listened to a podcast where somebody said the reason I've become a success is because my dad lost his job 5 times when I was growing up. So there's all these huge drivers that are usually not necessarily intellectually driven, but sometimes psychologically driven, right? That it
yeah,
can be kind of
yeah,
interesting. But getting back to the CEO dilemma, right? And I've experienced the same thing. It's kind of like very different views of what marketing really is for some of these CEOs. So, I mean, even kind of what do you do? Are you the guy that makes pictures or are you the guy that drives revenue? Talk a little bit about the varying difference definitions that you see in CEOs and how they.
yeah. Yeah, so I've seen a couple of different expectations that the CEO has. And my first experience learning about this was when I'd come from a really performance marketing driven company where marketing drove a lot of the revenue into the business. Um, and the CEO at the time, um, kind of said to me at one point, or in front of the whole company, I think he said, marketing is the caddy for the sales team. Um, they are helping guide the sales team on which direction they should be going, what they should be focused on, et cetera. And to me at the time, there was like nothing more offensive than I could ever have heard, right? Like I was kind of coming from a company where marketing was driving a ton of the pipeline, was very involved in the sales process. And I just saw it as so much more than that. But I
You're
think it
like,
was
wait a minute, I'm the engine. I'm not the caddy.
right. Yeah. And we've seen that change. And I don't think people quite what I write about that on LinkedIn does not get very much response of how much change we've seen in marketing. But we need to harken back to 2008. Before that, when marketing really was there to provide sales enablement material, they would give the sales team a list of leads to reach out to. They, didn't provide a ton of data on why they were reaching out to those leads. But marketing was really a sales enablement tool to make the sales of enablement material look nice, to all those things. So it, while I hated it, it was also a good lesson for me as we think about marketing today, where um, marketing's role should be to help guide, bring in the leads, educate the leads, qualify the leads and accounts so that they're ready to talk to the sales team, and hand them off to the sales team so that the sales team is set up to have a really good first conversation. Um,
Yeah, I
so
mean, I get, that the caddy metaphor, yeah, it can rub you the wrong way for sure. But then I guess it just depends on how you want to take it. I mean, heck, a lot of great golfers have great caddies, but
yeah,
they just never get the attention, right? So,
yeah,
if that fits your personality, maybe that does work for you.
yeah,
It's yeah,
yeah. Yeah, it wasn't my favorite. It did
right.
it I learned a lot from it, but it's still like if I heard that, if I was CMO and I heard that from the CEO today, I still think I'd be
I-
pretty offended. We
Right.
also see CEOs who are, expecting big brand campaigns, and they want grand scale of how their brand is being perceived. Um, I find that a lot of times those people see their firm is their reputation, and thus they want every single touch point, every single thing going out from that company to be representative of the brand they're trying to build. And then you have CEOs who are purely seeing this as sales needs leads, we need to generate pipeline, I want to see how you are associated with the pipeline that's coming in. So those are just three examples of the different types of CEOs that I've seen throughout my career. And I think it's really important in the interview process as you're starting to identify that, because the CEOs don't always know what type of marketer they need. They think I need marketing, and they assume that marketing is, you know, it's not all these different disciplines that it's become with product marketing, brand, and demand generation. They think it's, whatever they think it's one of those categories, and they're expecting to get that with any hire they bring in.
I couldn't agree more, right? I need marketing, and sometimes I need an outside resource for marketing. What does that look, right? And that could be a million different types
Yeah,
of agencies, right? I had
right.
somebody recently who said, I need a PR agency. What they were really looking for was pipeline, right?
Yeah,
So it's, to me, it's like super, it's super hard to tease that out. So you say you
right.
need to tease it out in the first 30 days. That would be a wise move how do you tease it out of somebody?
Yeah. Yeah, it's similar to the sales framework that I use when I'm working with companies. I am often looking. I would be asking, what are the goals? What does success look like in this role a year from now? And that's going to be indicative. How are you thinking about hiring? Like, what other roles do you think I'm going to need as we're building this out? What's most important to you? Getting to the crux of the challenges that the CEO is having, that's getting them to want to bring someone on. And what I see a lot of times is the company's gone through a couple of marketing leaders, and so what what is what's happening that's making you want to hire this role at this period of time, and why didn't this work in the past?
Mhm.
And oftentimes the CEO will have learned a little bit about what their preferences are, based on the marketers that they've inevitably gone through in the first parts of their career.
It's a really good lens to put on because I've had that experience myself where the needs of the CEO shifted, because I think that can happen. So,
Right.
I came into a startup organization, and the need of the CEO at that time in the beginning was, hey, I need to get the marketing function established. I need to get the kind of the team built out, need to establish a company name and a brand, and start getting some visibility and awareness out about the company. So helped with that, right? But then over time, it shifted towards, now we really need a marketer that is more of a product marketer that can really sharpen our messaging. And you need a lot of, the needs of the role became one where you really needed a lot of industry experience, which
Yeah.
I didn't have.
Yeah.
And so then the fit started not to be, what I wasn't the right fit anymore.
Yeah.
And I think seeing it through that lens that you've described, it makes so much more sense now, because sometimes you're the right role for one. You're maybe not you're not the right person for another need, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I would counter that, Alec, only because businesses change all the time, right? So your needs in the organization will shift, evolve, and change. And it's kind of like being able to shift with those needs. And yeah, maybe you need expertise that you don't have in your organization at that particular time. But your ability as a marketer to steer and see, do the forensics on what the organization needs versus that is probably a good that's a skill set that a CEO would need, right? But helping them walk through it a little bit by saying, it looks like we're shifting. Here's where I see us needing some, new expertise in the business. And we're going to probably have to decommit to some of these other things
Right.
based on, what we were working on before. Does that work for you? I mean, because this is all about trying to, smooth those rough edges. Because, John, what you were saying is sometimes you get in these disconnects. What do you do with
Right.
them, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree with both. I think there's a level of we need to grow with the company, but sometimes that can be really difficult, and the needs change. Um, I I went to go see the president of my college speak a couple of years ago, and he had a great analogy. So when I had been there had been this prolific president who was fantastic at raising money. He'd built a life sciences building, a bunch of new turf stadiums and fields at our campus. We're D3, so very small campuses. And then the new president came on, and he was kind of setting the tone of, look, I'm not going to be looking to build out. Like, we only have 400 acres. We only have so much we can build. I'm not going to be the prolific fundraiser. And he said, the previous president was the hardware president. He built the buildings, he established the stadiums. I'm the software. I'm going to work on, the programs. I'm going to focus on, the academics, the learning, and everything that's going on inside the university. And I think needs change over time, right? I would never be a great brand CMO. I think I'd be a very good CMO for a company that's looking to generate a lot of pipeline and looking to drive a lot of leads in the door. And I think understanding those like where your strengths are is really important for the companies that you work with. And
Yeah. Yeah. So you talk about these three types of CEOs, which I really loved, right? This
Yeah.
growth and performance engine CEO, this brand builder CEO, sales enablement CEO. And I've experienced those as well. And you talked a little bit about doing the forensics to figure out who you are dealing with, right?
Yeah.
That's number one. What happens when they say, yeah, I want it all? Yeah, I like that. Yeah, and that, because I've had that too.
Yeah. Uh, I, I always start with questions. So I dig in a little bit more to understand what's most important. And I think that question of understanding what success looks like when you look back in 12 months, how are we going to view this? Um, you know, uh, Going through that with them and kind of saying, is pipeline going to be more important, or are you going to care more if a lot of people are talking about your brand or how they're going to be looking at it? And part of me is thinking, well, here's how I would do it, right? I'd be the demand generation CMO. So this is how I'd build it up. And then I'd want budget to bring on a really good brand person and a really good product marketing person if you want to attack that problem that way. But I think kind of diving in deep to understand, how they're going to do that and what kind of budget it's going to take in order for them to be able to be great on all three aspects of the company is going to be really important. And depending on the stage of the company, if they're a publicly traded company and they're growing really quickly, then they probably can have it all. If they're, private equity backed growth stage company, 30 million, trying to grow 20% year over year, you're probably going to need to focus in on one area that you can be great for the business while, still paying attention to the other areas.
That's a great answer, John, because I think you went to both spots that I was thinking in my head, right? It's the one place first you went to, hey, you might, if you really do need all of that, then you have to assess where your strength is and then try to hire in to fill the gaps, which I think is a fantastic answer because that's what you got to do. But the other side of it is if they're asking for all three, you do need to push back a little bit too and say, wait, do you really need all three?
Yeah.
It's just like you said, if you're private equity stage, I mean, yeah, sure, you want a little bit of brand, but no, what they need growth, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the two are, yeah. Yeah. I don't want to say we're doing some like spammy demand generation tactics. We think the brand is the sum of every single touch point that you have. But yeah, you need to understand that, you only have so many dollars you can allocate towards growth. And you're going to need to, really think about how do you want to grow this business? And where is the focus going to be? And if you want to do everything, how are we going to be able to accomplish everything,
Right.
given the constraints that we all face, which is the amount of dollars we can put into something?
Okay, let's drill down. Say you have identified that this CEO, and because I've worked with these guys, is definitely a growth performance engine CEO. And yes, let's even put them in the scale up scenario. Let's put them in the I'm going from 15 to 30 million in the next, 18 months or 2 years, whatever. What do you do? How do you set up for that? What's the growth engine look like?
Yeah, so I'd want to understand how they got to 15 million. Um, the first question I'm always asking companies is how much do you sell your product for on an annual basis? Because that helps me put it into a bucket. There's a great article, I reference it a fair amount, called The 5 Ways to Build a $100 million Business, right? We're all trying, since this idea of a unicorn came out years ago, we're all trying to build $100 million businesses. Maybe it's $200 million businesses now. But we're all trying to scale up our business to the point where we can sell it or get a massive offer from a private equity firm. And so the article submits that there are 5 ways. You can sell 100 million people a product for $1 a year. You can you can sell 1,000 people a product for $10,000 a year, or 10,000 people for $10,000 a year, and you can sell 1,000 people a product for $100,000 a year. And there's different stages in between. But if you think about it, how you go to market with a product that you sell for $1, where you're trying to get mass adoption, like a WhatsApp, is going to be very different than how you sell a product for $100,000 a year or $1 million a year, like if you're Palantir or Workday or Salesforce, something like that. The strategies for go to market are going to be very different. And so understanding that, you can start to piece back and understand the channels and the growth strategies that you're going to leverage in order to go into that. And that would be kind of an outline. And I love to use that framework and slides to kind of show how go-to-market changes based off of it. And Christoph Jans has a great image of, the y-axis and the x-axis, and how he has elephants, something, deer, rabbits, and a gnat on there to represent the different deal sizes that you're ultimately selling the product for. And so that would be my starting point for building out the strategy.
Yeah, I mean, hello, marketing starts with math, okay?
Yeah.
And I tell my kids, you're gonna love math because everything starts with math in this world,
Yeah.
pretty much. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I said this because I just had a piece of business, right? Where you had one deal size really, really big, took a year because there's also a timing aspect of it too,
Yes.
right? There's
Yeah.
an amount and a timing aspect of it. And then there's also the inertia of resource that I can develop to drive, right? So there's a 3-month deal and a smaller number, and there's a year-long deal and a larger number. Now, you have to do both, but if you have a certain time frame, right? Because everybody needs a quick win in this world. Where are
Yes.
you going to put your resource for that particular business? Because that's all we have. We have money and resource, our time.
Yeah. So are you talking about for that specific example, or when we're building out a
Yeah.
go to
So,
market?
do you also give them segments that you need to go after based on what the CEO says? Because obviously, you need a quick win on things, right? You
Yeah.
just like
So
segmentation as well.
yeah, I would focus on segmentation of the market. And I think like a lot of the companies that you deal with, under $500 million, there's always some type of market segment shift that they're seeing, where they have a market that they've done really well in, and they have the expansion opportunity that they're looking to go into, whether it's, new software they're looking to sell into their audience, or a new industry that they want to see tremendous growth in. And so, yeah, I'd look to prioritize and understand what the quick wins would look like. When you're selling enterprise products, you do want to identify how can we show success before the revenue gets in the door, so that we can double down and drive more revenue.
Mm, yeah.
You don't want to have to wait 12 months to understand something is successful. Right. And you could have company, like if you're selling enterprise deals, the logos are important, the revenue is incredibly important, but you don't want to have to wait 6 to 12 months to see the deals close before you can double down on, the 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 channel that it was that brought that revenue in the door. And so setting those expectations with the CEO from the very beginning.
Hey, John, let me go back and ask you a follow up on what you said about the first place you start is understanding how they got to that revenue to begin with, and distinguishing between, you know, selling lots of low dollar value versus fewer high dollar value. Do you go there first because a lot of companies, maybe they don't deliberately or consciously think through that step? And I guess what I'm asking here is, when you go in and are trying to figure out a company and help them solve demand gen, what are the kinds of mistakes or strategic mistakes that companies usually make, or that you discover, right, that are holding them back? What are the kind of things that you often see most as the reasons why demand gen gets stuck?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it is expectation. And when you understand the ACV, you start to learn a lot about a business. You could start to get a pretty strong understanding of how long it takes for them to close a deal once that deal gets open. So life cycle. You get an understanding of the types of channels that are going to be successful for them. So when somebody's selling a product for $10,000, we know we're going to need to drive a lot of volume. We know that we're going to need to qualify the leads. And we know that we're going to need to have a really good lead qualification system. And we know that the sales team is going to be dealing with a large volume of leads coming in the door. When you're selling $1 million deal, you know, you need to be very careful with every deal that comes in the door. There's you're not going to be building these kind of massive lead nurture campaigns like you do for the $10,000 company. And you're likely going to be selling to a larger buying committee inside of that company, because $1 million purchase on software is going to be big, almost no matter who you're selling that product to. Um, so so yeah, I see that ACV as a really important indicator of where you need to be investing your marketing resources. I also think for larger deals, a lot of times, um, you're probably going to want more of like a product marketing CMO, although that because there's more need for sales support. You want that you really are a little bit more of a caddy. You're more responsible now than ever to drive pipeline, but you do want somebody who can, provide the right sales enablement material, set the sales team up for really good initial conversations. And I see a lot of those CMOs and people in product marketing for those size deals. They're involved in the sales meetings. They're sitting in on those calls, whereas you don't see that when you're selling a $10,000 a year a
Yeah.
month product, $10,000 a year product.
Okay. Now, so great answer on that. What if you have both ends of that spectrum, right? So you're a company, because you've got a portfolio, you've got some products that are really high ACV, but you also have products that are low ACV, and it's a pretty good balance. That probably just means you just have to run two demand gen streams, right? Is that how you would
Right.
look at it?
Yeah. Yeah, so when you're a smaller company, that becomes really difficult to do. As you get larger, once you have the resources, I would see those two teams broken out into distinct categories. And so a lot of companies we see are building out marketing teams based off segment of the industry. So they have like product marketers who understand their enterprise segment versus the mid-market segment. I think that works well. And then the demand generation team is kind of servicing both segments, but leveraging different strategies to do both.
I've seen that where a company will start out in a mid market and then
Yeah,
say, now I want to go after enterprise, right? But that they forget that you do have to invest a little bit differently in what that demand gen looks like,
right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the other aspect that I think CEOs need to pattern match on when they're making these hires is what type of deal are you selling throughout the process? Because up until this point in my career, I wouldn't have really understood how to sell $1 million deal. I would have been in there, you know. Let's go back to when I was 25. I always said, okay, let's invest in Google Ads, SEO, and that's not necessarily going to be the right type of thing when you're trying to drive $1 million deals. You need
You might
in
need
one of my
webinars,
roles. Yeah,
right?
right. One of my roles, I completely, or second job in my career, I did not create sales enablement material, right? And the business was a volume business at the time, but they were looking to move up market. I didn't understand that. I wasn't able to see that. And so, when you're a CEO, you need to be thinking about the the type of person that you're bringing on, right? The head of growth at Facebook is probably not going to be the right fit for the head of growth at Workday. Like it's just going to be a different challenge altogether in terms of where time, energy, and effort. One is going to be very data driven. The other one is going to leverage every data point they can get, but focused on the quality of the interactions that they
Yeah.
have with the customer.
Great answer. So John, let me ask you, I'll give you a couple of, give us some real world examples of how, case studies or things that you have been able to turn around or really kickstart for some of these organizations. I love case studies. That's my thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've had a company we saw um a big lift in ROI. So I was looking at it the other day. We've maintained the same level of spend on Google Ads for this company while helping them increase the pipeline ROAS that they're seeing by 740%. So that was an interesting one, and that was another one where we were able to leverage Google to get more segmented with the areas of the market that we're focused in. So they were focused on small to medium sized businesses originally. They moved into the mid market. They identified 5 segments of the market that they were really focused on. And a lot of times, marketers kind of throw their hands up because Google Ads, you're capturing demand. You don't have control of who you're going after. But we found by training the Google algorithm on what types of leads were really good for them, leveraging the audiences inside of Google Ads, and then improving and changing ad copy and what we call the prospect experience, we were able to drive bigger results. While we kept Google Ads flat, we also scaled up paid social. So that's their largest channel today, and they're seeing similar type results with pipeline growth there as well.
Ask you to look into your crystal ball here for a second. What do you think is changing right now? I mean, there's so much changing in terms of search traffic. They say that, if you just listen to the CEO of Microsoft, SaaS products is actually probably on the downside and agents are on the upside. What are you seeing and what do you expect on the horizon to be changing?
Yeah.
ChatGPT search? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, so the idea of software as a service going away is an interesting one. I think what I'm focused on is recurring revenue businesses. It seems like as soon as, SaaS for the first 25 years of it being around has really been a database, right? And now that it has AI, software can actually be a service to your business, and we're stripping that of its title and we're calling it an agent now. So I don't care what you call it. It's software. It's a recurring revenue business. I do think the business model will change. We're seeing a lot because the cost of AI and searches is much more expensive than traditional software as a service. And so, you will see more usage based pricing on software moving forward as AI gets integrated into the platforms. We're moving to more of like not a no click environment, but a low click environment where a lot of searches are people are getting the answers they're looking for, and thus they're not clicking on a result in order to get more. And LLMs have been incredibly interesting. The research that we've done so far has indicated in enterprise software, there are a couple of key contributors to getting visibility in the results of the LLMs, and then also in terms of providing sentiment about how the market feels about your product. I think we're moving from a world where Google had us very focused on our own site content, driving in traffic, developing content for the search, not for the search engines, for the users, but that would drive traffic for the from the search engines, um, to a world where the LLMs are looking at user-generated content about you on Reddit, G2 Crowd, and others. They're looking at your site content, and then they're looking at industry publications like Gartner and Forrester and TechTarget, CIO.com, and they're building they're looking at all of that in order to deliver results about what your product is. So we're truly moving to this world of SEO or AI optimization where your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. You don't have full control over what's showing up in the search results anymore. You never did, but you know what I mean? Like, we're not controlling the message. The LLMs are compiling the message and delivering a result. And so that's going to be a big shift in SEO. Um, and I personally think it's exciting. And we're seeing the cost of data go down, right? The data augmentation providers are that cost consistently goes down. And so I think that how smart your database is and how you can leverage that data to drive personalized campaigns is going to be really interesting. I'm a big fan of clay.com. And there are a lot that feels like I'm learning about a new tool every week that's going to allow us to have even better context of who our customers are. So those are the three big things for me right now that are happening in the industry.
I love that answer. I've never heard anyone yet laid out very clearly like that. So thank you for doing that. Given that, if you're a marketer right now, what would you recommend that they start doing or changing given the three things that you just said? Do you have any recommendations on that?
From a behavioral standpoint, I would be studying AI. I think this is going to be a tremendous opportunity, right? You want to, they're not to give a shout out to a rival podcast, but Lenny's podcast is a really good one. And I was just listening to an episode with an engineer from OpenAI talking about how the models are built. So I think understanding on that level, and then thinking about using it and how you're using it in your own life is going to be critical, right? And there you're going to be able to build empathy for how your customers and prospects are using it. And so I would make a big investment in leveraging AI throughout your workflow throughout the day so you can better understand it and understand how to use it. Because I think companies that don't have a clean database, that don't have good infrastructure in place, the separation is going to be so huge, right? You're going to have companies that are manually taking a week to set up an email campaign and run a webinar to come versus companies who are able to go from idea to execution in minutes because they can, their database is clean. They have automation plus AI. It's just going to accelerate the pace of marketing. And so that's going to be, critical.
The way I searched something the other day, it was a health and wellness product, right? So I was searching it, and of course I went to ChatGPT and I said, can you tell me who I should go to for XYZ, right?
Yeah.
And they gave me three or four companies, and they actually highlighted, this is a low end, this is a medium end, and this is a high end company, right?
Yeah.
And I said, gee, I really heard some disturbing comments about high end company here. And then it came back and said, gee, I'm sorry you've heard that. I mean, and so I'm wondering how my engagement with it is also shaping those changes as we move forward as well. So it's going to be fascinating. I really,
right.
You have to be a forensic, decision maker, psychologist in figuring out how this is all working together.
Yeah. I mean, it just comes back to your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room, right? You can't
Right.
control what everybody's saying about you on G2 Crowd. So the better you are at, messaging the value of your product, the more that aligns with the value that the customers are actually having with you, the more likely you're, what you want your brand to be and what's represented about you in the LLMs is going to become accurate. But I think that use case is fascinating. And we see a lot of companies.
Guess what? That ups the ante on your authenticity in a way that we haven't really thought through yet,
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And going back to this idea of what segment of the market are you going after? The LLMs are making very clear recommendations about who this software is for, who it's not for, why you should use it, when you should choose it. Changes the buying behavior a lot. Um,
Yeah.
and so you're going to need to be really smart about how you position your company, who it's for, and how you're training that data, because I think we'll see more products emerge there in the recommendation space.
I'm totally with you. John, how do people get a hold of you if they want to talk to you about demand gen?
The best place is LinkedIn. So I'm writing a fair amount there. You found me there. We now have taken an online friendship offline onto Riverside Call, and I love that. I think that platform is just an awesome way to connect and get to meet people. And I've really built my network up through the year, primarily through posting, through DMs, et cetera. So LinkedIn, search for John Short, Compound Growth Marketing.
Terrific. Thank you
Ooh.
for talking with us, John. Loved having you on the show. You get a lot of great insights, and I think it's going to be a great episode. So thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.